Modern life has a very simple definition of a good day: do more. We are encouraged to start early, cover ground and arrive on time, and somehow even our free time has become measurable, which may explain why from the outside people on the Camino de Santiago can look surprisingly lazy. By the time we were actually ready to leave Pontedeume, I had already mentally walked half a stage, while Erika had apparently decided that Camino deserved another morning.
Hey, are you ready? Not yet.
This is one of those differences between us that becomes very obvious when we travel. Once I know there is a destination somewhere ahead, I immediately start organizing the day around reaching it. I do not necessarily need to arrive early, but I like the feeling that we have started properly and the kilometers are gradually disappearing behind us. Erika is much more comfortable allowing the morning to develop before deciding what the morning is going to become. So before following the arrows towards Miño, we started with the coffee. At that point I could still defend the decision very easily because coffee is a particularly part of the Camino logistic. You wake up, you find something to eat, regain enough personality, and then you begin walking. The problem was that once we sat down, Pontedeume started happening around us. The streets were getting busier, the shops were opening, an entirely normal morning, while we were supposed to be leaving. Then we reached the market. This is exactly the kind of place that becomes more interesting when you are traveling on foot, because you are not arriving only to visit an attraction. You are arriving at the same time local people are buying food, talking to vendors, and getting on with their day. There were fruit and vegetables, local products, people moving between the stalls and enough ham hanging behind the counters to make it very difficult to walk straight through without paying attention. And this is where the differences between walking somewhere and simply visiting somewhere becomes very obvious. If you are by car, you usually know what are you looking for before you have even parked. You have probably saved the restaurant, checked the monument, and know roughly how much time you want to spend there before moving on. On foot, the ordinary parts of the place start competing with the famous ones. You notice the fruit shop because you actually need fruit. You notice the market because people are using it. You start in a square longer because you are not rushing back to a car. None of those things sounds particularly important when you list afterwards, but together they begin to give you a much stronger feeling of the place. So instead of leaving Pontedeume, we kept wandering through it, and eventually you reached the Torreón dos Andrade. By the point, the stage to Miño had barely started, but the day already had. And I think this is the part I often forget. I tend to think that Camino begins when you are moving forward. Some mornings the journey has already started long before we have put any real decision behind us. And perhaps this is the part of why Camino life can look strange from the outside. You can spend most of the day moving towards one destination while also spending a surprising amount of time doing things that do not make the kilometer count move at all. So you see, when it comes to planning your first Camino, one of the easiest ways to get overwhelmed is trying to pull information from 10 different places and somehow turn them into the clear plan. That's why we used Gronze. Gronze is one of the oldest and the best known Camino planning platforms, and their website is specifically useful when you're still in the pre-Camino phase trying to make sense of it all. You can compare different routes, look at the stages day by day, check distances and elevations, see the towns along the way, and get a much clearer picture of what your Camino actually looks like before you even start. I say that matters because planning the first Camino is not only about building the most ambitious itinerary, it's about building one that fits your time, your body, and the kind of experience you want to have. And once you're actually out there walking, they also have an app for the Camino, which we use all the time. Remember, the gronze.com, you can find it in the Apple Store, Google Play Store, and in the link just in the description. According to the version of the day inside my head, we should already have been much farther along. But once an early departure was clearly no longer possible, something different happened. I stopped trying to save it. As we gained height, The town slowly began to disappear behind. The streets became quieter, the houses more scattered, and surroundings gradually opened into greener country. That transition is one of those things I enjoy about Camino Inglés. You can spend the first part of the morning inside the historic town and, not long afterwards, find yourself walking through a completely different landscape. The Camino does not separate these places neatly. One gradually becomes the next. Once we were properly walking, I expected the late start to begin bothering me again, but strangely it did not. We still had the same distance ahead, but by that time the morning no longer felt wasted and gave Blue enough time to inspect almost everything beside the path. At one point we passed off the golf course in a place where neither of us was expecting to find one. That does not make Camino less interesting. It makes it real. You are walking through places where people are already living their lives. Walking with Blue makes us notice another layer of all this because he pays attention to things we would ignore. For us, a plant beside the path can simply be a part of the scenery. On this stage, we are reminded that some of the plants growing beside the route can be dangerous for him, even though they looked completely harmless. By then, we had actually walked enough for me to feel that another coffee was completely justified. The funny thing is that these stops do not really feel separate from the Camino. At home, we often treat rest as something that comes after the work has been completed. You finish the task and then you sit down. On a multi-day walk, that logic becomes very difficult to maintain because the walking is never really finished. Even when we reached Miño, another stage is waiting tomorrow. So the pauses gradually move inside the journey instead of sitting at the end of it. You walk for a while, stop when you need something, recover, eat, refill your water and then continue. That rhythm may look inefficient if the only goal is to reach the destination as quickly as possible. But by this point of the day, reaching Miño quickly no longer seemed particularly important. I realized that the most of what I remembered from the day had happened precisely because we had not rushed through it. The market in Pontedeume, the huge piece of ham behind the counter, the fruit shop, the Torreon, the streets we wandered through, the things Blue made us notice and the coffee where we stopped when we needed it. None of those things helped us arrive sooner, but together they became most of the day. And maybe this is why people on the Camino look lazy from outside. You see the sitting, the coffees, the wandering around towns and the long stops, but you do not always see what those moments are adding to the journey. And if you like what we do, remember to subscribe. This is absolutely for free and helps us to provide this free information to everybody. Buen camino.